A Bronx, New York man showed up at a hospital last week, a stab wound to his arm, his girlfriend in critical condition, saying they had just been attacked by people on a moped. The problem is, this fantastical story quickly unraveled, and now he is the one charged with her murder. We are bringing on retired NYPD detective Dave Sarni to talk about how police put the pieces together. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Let's talk about this. So 44-year-old Franklin Batallas showed up at Montefiore Hospital in New Rochelle on September 17th with a horrific story. He claimed that he and his girlfriend were on their way to dinner on City Island when they were attacked by two people on a moped. Okay? Now, the New York Post reports that Batallas told police that he had stopped near Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx because he had to go to the bathroom. And he said while he was out of the car, two black men wearing all black that they raced up to the car and tried to rob his girlfriend, 30-year-old Anthonella Contreras-Linarez. Now, Batallas claims that she resisted, so they attacked her. They viciously stabbed her in the face, neck, and body. And he said he rushed back over to the car to try to get involved, to try to intervene, to try to stop them, and he got slashed on the arm. And that is when the alleged attackers, according to him, took off on their moped. And Batallas rushed Anthonella to the hospital where she was pronounced dead. Very sad situation and really horrifying situation. And also pretty wild story, right? But here's the thing. Police in the Bronx, they thought it was maybe too wild of a story too. And so while they launched an investigation into these mysterious moped-riding criminals, they also started looking into Batallas. And they were able to poke holes in his story pretty much immediately. NYPD detectives questioned him, and his story unraveled, sources told the New York Post and the New York Daily News. According to the police sources, Anthonella and Batallas were in the process of breaking up. Kind of unclear what had happened right before the stabbing, but they say he is the one responsible. Now, he was arrested. He was arraigned on Friday. According to his online case information, he has been charged with first-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter with the intent to cause serious physical injury, and criminal possession of a weapon. He has entered a not guilty plea to all three charges. He was remanded without bail. I want to talk about this investigation. I want to welcome back on David Sarni, the retired NYPD detective, kind of give us a look at what was likely going on behind the scenes in this case. So from your perspective, as I laid it out, does that story that Batallas allegedly gave police, does that immediately raise alarm bells with you? If you were the responding officer, would you say something's not adding up?
Well, first, again, thanks for having me. We have robberies like that in the past. We've had situations with moped, individuals on mopeds doing robberies. But what happens is once we get the person and we sit down and talk to them, we try to get their story and create a timeline. And not only that, when you're doing the timeline, you're also looking at the victim. He said he had lacerations to his arm. And apparently, while they probably interviewed him, they noticed he had hair, like dark hair in his hand. So that's something you're going to go, wait a minute. If he's telling you the story, how does that happen? So what you're doing is you're trying to create the timeline of the individual, telling you where he was at the time it happened. He said he was out of the vehicle when the robbery took place. Where was he? When did he get to approach the vehicle? So it's going to be a step-by-step process to hear him tell the story. We usually let them tell the story first, and then we'll just have them repeat it and maybe over and over again. And then as you do this, you'll notice that things aren't adding up. And especially dealing with the fact that the woman was viciously stabbed. This isn't a one-time stabbing. And after you're talking about a robbery, robbery perps don't necessarily do multiple stabbings like that.
Let me just expand upon that. You're saying an attack like that, you haven't, it's not common, you know, coming up on a moped, trying to commit a robbery and, you know, stabbing someone.
Right. In the fact that he's saying she's in the car and the multiple stabbings take place, you know, how did that happen? And that's something in your head automatically, because usually when you talk about persons who stabbed numerous times, there's some sort of relationship to the person. That's what we see. But I always tell investigators when I was doing training and things, and I did that, let the truth come out in the facts that you find. Let them tell you their version of what happened, and then determine whether or not you can either support it or refute it with the facts that you have available to you at the time. But there are things that will come out and go kind of unusual, especially multiple stab wounds on a victim. They're just trying to do a robbery.
Right.
And especially the amount of stab wounds, it seems, on the victim was definitely unusual.
Now, you may think by watching Sidebar you've seen it all. Let me tell you, think again. 50 Ways to Catch a Killer, okay? This brings you real cases where detectives had to flip the script to take down cold-blooded killers. Hosted by 50 Cent, this isn't your typical crime show, okay? It is a high-stakes, twist-filled ride into the minds of investigators who think outside the badge to break the case. From unforgettable setups to shocking reveals, every episode proves when killers think they got away with murder, think again. Watch 50 Ways to Catch a Killer with 50 Cent exclusively on Fox Nation. Now, according to reporting from the New York Daily News, there are a few cameras in that area where Batallas said this stabbing had happened. What do you take away from that? How much impact does that have figuring out what happened here?
Well, that's very important because that's where his story comes into play. Sometimes what we do with the victim is do what's called a walkthrough. You would take him to the area where it happened, and he could show you where it is, and then you will notice the cameras. So if he's telling you all this information, you're going to refer back to the cameras. Apparently, he said during one of his interviews is they followed him on the moped. They were following them. During that time, when they said that, they did not see any mopeds following him at that time. So that's already one break in the story. And these are things that come into play piece by piece. That starts telling you he's not being truthful. If this is the murder of his girlfriend, you're going to be honest the whole way through. If someone else did it, if you did it, you're going to kind of find ways to make the story, and especially the urination story. That's always one of those things that you were not there when it happened, but then you showed up and you tried to be the hero and save your girlfriend, but then you got a slash wound. And it comes down to the laceration. Is it a defensive wound, or is it a wound that he sustained while he was stabbing?
Or is it possible, if we take the allegations as true, that Batallas stabbed himself to make this story seem more plausible?
Absolutely. That's what you look at. And I think what you do is when you have those lacerations, you take photos of lacerations to his arm and to determine whether it's a defensive wound, a wound that he put himself on, did to himself, or a wound he sustained while attacking the girlfriend. Sometimes what you see is when these knife attacks happen, perpetrators may have injuries to their hands because as they're stabbing, the amount of times they're having, the knife could slip because of the unfortunate amount of blood that's being released, and it could slip and it could cause an injury to their hands. So those are things you look at when you're talking to an individual who said he was a victim of stabbing, or his girlfriend in this case, the victim of stabbing.
Let's go back to what you mentioned before, like the first steps. Obviously, you talked about going to surveillance, you talk about interviewing him multiple times to get to the story, but in terms of the actual processing of evidence and processing of the scene and collecting evidence, in this kind of case, what are the next steps to corroborate or seemingly try to corroborate the story or say something's not adding up? What is it? I mean, do you have to apply for a warrant to get his phone? You would have to have probable cause that he committed this crime, but he's just relayed a harrowing account of what happened to him and his girlfriend. How does it work for police here?
Well, the crime scene's mobile because you have the vehicle right there, which is the initial crime scene where the stab, where she's bled out, that you have. He has the crime scene where he said the attack took place. So there are multiple locations in which you might have to look for evidence, look for something along the lines of, and that's why the video cameras became so important. You're looking for the secondary crime scene where it happened, where the location of occurrence he states happened. And you also look for evidence, trace evidence. Is there blood on the scene? Is there traces of blood on the scene where he said she was stabbed? Or was it all self-contained in the car? You're going to look at the vehicle itself to see, is there blood on the door, on her doorway? Where is the blood located in the car? Is it on his side, on her side? Is it all throughout the car? When you seize that car into evidence based on the warrant, which you'll have to probably be best off getting at this point, because you have a victim of crime, you want to get the evidence. A search warrant wouldn't be too difficult to get. The later on, the subsequent warrants will be for cell phone. If his vehicle is a newer model vehicle, they do have GPS in those vehicles, so you can probably get the computer for that GPS system. There's a lot of things you'll go afterwards. But based on what they had available to them right now, there was enough evidence to at least charge him with the crime of murder.
And what information can hospital personnel be able to offer police to help with an investigation?
Well, that's also the important part. When a stabbing takes place, they know that they're mandated by stabbings and shootings. They're mandated to notify the police. So we'll speak to the initial physician. If there's EMS on the scene, speak to the EMS workers, see what he said to them, see what anything he said outside of our interview to them directly, and also speaking to the physician who's there, the doctor who attended the scene, and speak to them and say, what do you see? What about the arm? We'll ask about these things. We'll always ask questions. Type of stabs, how many stab wounds? If you can determine that at that time, Where were they located? We can kind of see those things will come into play. But that also that injury he sustained, is that a really serious injury, or is it, again, something that he might have cut himself? It's like a little secondary type of thing.
And just going back to one more thing, the Batallas' hair allegedly in Anthenella's hand goes to the hospital. Is there a benign explanation for that, or does it look like she's grabbing him in the middle of an attack?
Well, that's to be looking at, because then there's a question. You could take photos of that, which is a good idea to take photos of the scene, and hear what he said. And that's why the initial interview is very important. When his girlfriend's getting stabbed, what did you do? He tried to stop her. And you may ask that question about the hair being in, but sometimes a lot of things is, what did you do? We like to actually see, physically show us what happened when she was attacked. Did you put your hands out? Did you try to grab her? Did you try to pull her in? So then we could try to explain either as a confirmatory or refuting his information about the hair in his hand. You could say, I never touched her, I just got into the car. Then that makes something, wait a minute, that's kind of difficult. You never touched her. How do you have your hair in her hand? So these are things that come out with that interview. That's why the initial interview and the subsequent interviews are so important, to develop that timeline and to see where the stories are factual and when the stories aren't.
Now, according to the Daily News and the New York Post, Anthenella's family was immediately suspicious of this mugging story. In fact, Anthenella's brother, Maker Contreras, told the New York Post, why, if you were with her, how did you let this happen? Because if you have a wife or a daughter, and if your wife is in danger, you give your life for your wife. He went on to say, we're devastated. The light of your happiness, everything that has represented joy in your family and your home, it's gone. The glue that kept us together, it was her. Her sister Melenis told the Daily News, we never expected this. We knew he was aggressive, but we never thought it would come to this. According to family members, Anthonella came to the United States 11 years ago from the Dominican Republic. She had big dreams of one day becoming an anesthesiologist. Her mother told reporters that Anthonella and Batallas had met in a restaurant, been together around 6 years. Her mom also said that Anthonella attended Bronx Community College, Lehman College, Manhattanville University, was a registered nurse at Mount Sinai. In fact, Mount Sinai Hospital says that Anthonella was a registered nurse at the Mount Sinai Morningside, saying in a statement, the Mount Sinai Health System community is mourning the loss of one of our own. We wish to convey our heartfelt condolences to family, friends, and colleagues, and ask that you keep them in your thoughts. Again, this is a statement from them. And by the way, Batallas is expected in court later this week. Let me just stop right here. Dave, from your perspective, does that stand out to you? Anything strange? Because you're talking about a relatively long relationship. No one expected anything. And then you drive at 180 miles per hour on the other way. And according to authorities, he not only killed her, but came up with this story to say it was someone else. And by the way, who does he blame? He blames just random black men. That's so wrong on so many different levels, but like that's what he allegedly comes up with. And it's just like, that is a really big 180 there. But is that something that you see? I talk about it a lot, that is it possible somebody who, might have seemed okay on the outside, maybe somebody who doesn't have a criminal history, they're about to commit a murder or they're about to commit manslaughter? A criminal starts somewhere. Sometimes the worst crime they commit, the first crime they commit is the worst crime you can imagine. But does that stand out to you?
It stands out because it's domestic, and that's why I think the severity of the stab wounds kind of already gave the detectives cause to really look into a story. And that's an important factor. These domestic incidents can just explode at once. We don't know if there were any more domestic incident reports that they had, if there was any situations of violence before. They said he was aggressive, but were there situations where he was overly aggressive that nobody saw? Because this type of action, this murder, allegedly done by him, is it's brutal. It's a brutal way to kill your person you've been with for 6 years. But this is one thing he might be able to play into, that he just saw red, he was upset, he could play that card in the defense. But is it unusual to see domestic incidents end with a murder? Sadly not. But there usually is an escalation of some sort. This might have been the last resort, because we don't know if the weapon was recovered at this time. I'm not sure if it was. So that's an issue into itself, because now the actions may have been premeditated. If there's no knife at the scene, now you're looking at the person's intent was to cover up what he did. So that's why they charged him with manslaughter along with the murder charge.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that. Why the different charges?
Because murder in the first degree, you're gonna have to show, intent, that knowingly intent. Manslaughter, it could be a different level of a couple of mental states. So that's the other thing. So they want to make sure they cover all bases to make sure If they only charge the murder charge and they go to trial with that murder charge and he's acquitted of the murder charge, that's it. They could actually find him not guilty of murder, but then find him guilty of manslaughter. And also, it's maybe part of the parcel to possibly a plea arrangement that the Bronx DA's office has with him.
By the way, this case has, unfortunately, a lot of eerie similarities to a story that pretty much dominated headlines back in the late 80s and early 90s. You might remember this case. It's Carol Ann Stewart. Her and her husband, Charles Michael Stewart Jr. This was a big case. So Charles had called 911 from Boston's predominantly black Mission Hill neighborhood on October 23rd, 1989. Now, he had apparently said that a young black man had forced his way into their car at a stoplight, forced them to drive to a nearby spot where he then shot Charles in the stomach and Carol in the head. Carol, by the way, was pregnant with the couple's first child, and an emergency C-section was done at the hospital before she died. That baby spent more than 2 weeks in the ICU before he died too. Charles survived. Really, really sad case. But then it turns out a few months later, the entire story that Charles had told police had been a hoax. It's believed Charles shot his wife, then himself, called 911 from his car phone, and on the same day that Charles's younger brother Matthew told police about the hoax, that is when Charles ended it. He took his own life. Now, Dave, again, a lot of similarities there. Police had their suspect much quicker in this investigation. Is this something that's common? Do you see these kinds of cases?
Unfortunately, not as common as we see, but I have seen. I was just looking over homicide supplement from the NYPD, and we have a lot of domestic incidents that are that way. They end up in murders. And it's unfortunate because usually these murders don't take place in a vacuum. There's usually an escalation somewhere. That's what we usually see, some sort of escalation to violence, to that type of violence. In this case, they said he was aggressive, but now we're going to look, I guarantee you, we're looking back at the domestic incident reports. They're going to be talking to neighbors, friends, other relatives that they haven't spoken to yet, and said what was the relationship between the two. Because we really have to see where this violence came. I don't say it's unusual, it's not uncommon. It happens. Relationships are volatile. There's such a honeymoon part of a relationship, and then eventually sometimes become very angry at each other and then becomes venomous. And if this breakup was going to be a breakup and he couldn't handle it, he could have just exploded, but he already knew he had an aggressive temper already. So this might have just pushed him over that edge to allegedly commit this murder.
And before we wrap things up, just again, you have to compliment law enforcement here, who detected something was off, looked into this, because this could have been a situation where maybe if it wasn't properly investigated, this would have been the narrative that moves forward through the years.
Yeah, this is something that we try to instill investigators and really tell people that it's not just based. The story is one thing, but there's all sides to the truth. There's one side, there's her story, his story, and then the truth. And detectives are truth finders. They have to find out the facts of the case, the facts of the information. We can go based on a story, a complaint, but we have to find out that complaint is actually valid. And his complaint sounded valid at the moment, but as things came to play, the hospital probably thought this is what happened. But detectives are always questioning. Detectives are always looking to see what really happened. That's the reason why detectives do what they do. We're the ones to be pretty much the only ones in criminal justice that look for the truth. We will look for what really happened. He says one story. Does that story stick up to the evidence to support that story? And as the detectives worked this case, they found that it did. And that's beneficial because we want to make sure it's not what you think, it's what you can prove. And right now, they proved it enough to have him arrested for murder, how the criminal justice acts upon that arrest will be based on the continuing collection of evidence by the detectives and the work of the district attorney's office.
Dave Sarni, thanks so much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you much. Take care and stay safe.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll see you next time.